Hey, welcome to This Week on A Little Better. My name is Daniel, and I'll be your host. This week is the last week on Revelation Questions. Remember, our goal on this podcast is to know Jesus better, and by the power of His Spirit, do better, so together we can be a little better. Hey, welcome to A Little Better. It's the last week of Revelation Questions.
Woohoo!
Shout out.
I'm raising the roof. Can't see if you're listening. I'm raising the roof like the cool kids do back in the 80s.
Praise God. Okay. Well, here we go. We're diving into our last few questions. But before we dive into actual questions that were sent in, I want to ask all of you one of my own questions. So this past Sunday, Drew, you preached on heaven, which we did a heaven series a couple of months ago, back in October of 2021, which we will link that series in the show notes, as well as the heaven questions that were sent in by listeners of that series, if you want to go back and watch that. But this conversation won't be filled with that. But the question I want to ask is, what are you looking forward to most about heaven in light of this past Sunday?
So you usually start with such a fun, silly kind of question.
I know, it was usually silly.
That's dead
It was
serious.
kind of serious. I just, but...
When we listen for I mean, I guess there's silly answers to that.
Yeah.
I
Make it silly, Brad.
It's a broken record for me. You always hear it from me over and over
Brad's
and over
gonna be
again.
serious.
I'll be serious, which is the inability to have a sinful desire. That's my greatest
I mean, I'll do the Sunday school answer.
anticipation.
Jesus?
Jesus.
I mean, honestly, I think all the things, right? Like, I can't wait to see like Streets of Gold. That sounds pretty sweet. Obviously, not being able to sin, everybody living in harmony, no more tears, mourning, regret.
Yeah.
All the things.
I'll be the silly or just bottom shelf answer, I guess. I don't know. But I'm in light of last week's podcast, I've been thinking about creation without brokenness of sin a little bit. You know, we talked about like flower beds always being perfect, and of just seeing creation without sin tainting it. Like I can't fathom what that might look like, because I think creation is so beautiful as it is right now, but seeing it without any dead trees or browning leaves or whatever that may look like in the future.
On that note, too, like our perfect bodies.
Yeah.
What are they going to look like?
Oh man, I am looking forward to that. That'll be sweet. I've had years of breaking down here. I'm looking forward to
not having to work
that.
out to have abs of steel, right?
Well, I gave that up a while ago.
I gave that up. All right, here we go. Not heaven questions. Revelation questions. The one sent in from last week is, what is the common belief among theologians as to why the United States is not mentioned in the book of Revelation?
We get raptured out of the way. We're so good. There's so many Christians here. The place is just an empty
the
parking lot.
person said among theologians.
Among theologians.
Not what
Remember
you
the
want
time
to
where we
happen.
told you not to say that on the podcast, Brad? I think the simple answer is, when this was written, the United States didn't exist.
Well, there's that too.
1,600 years.
I mean, like, this is first century, and so not that if it did exist,
but thinking
it would
about
be mentioned.
The book of Revelation is, there's a futuristic element. So why didn't John just include future or civilizations, in that regard?
Well, would it have been helpful or even understood? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you clearly see what John writes. So much of it rings true to the experience that, that history, progress history, persecution, the rest of it. There's so many things they can identify with. I think it would just be confusing. Right.
Well, and some of Revelation it's to reveal and not to reveal, right?
Yeah.
So I think some of it is God didn't give us too much because He knew we couldn't handle it, And I think a lot of it is up to God's sovereignty to fulfill.
Yeah.
And so who knows what the United States might play zero role, might play a lot of role, might play no role.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you had a really true statement in that regard of before I pushed back, which was we had 1,600 years before the United States was even a thing as an organized civilization in that regard. And one just helpful point in Bible reading in any book is that
it doesn't revolve around the United States.
It does not revolve around the United States. Like Christianity as a organized religion, even if you want to say that, and putting it on the same playing field with all other religions, did not start in the United States. Even though so many Christians, we feel like, for whatever reason, well, Christianity, it's all about the U.S. It's not.
No.
It did not start.
And really, you were alluding to this earlier before we hit play or record. We're not in the vanguard anymore either.
Yeah.
I mean, really, as far as there's little islands of blessing, churches that are thriving. But if you look at the United States as a whole, it's been a pretty consistent decline in church attendance, a decline in self-identification as Christians. But you see it blossoming, Africa, Latin America, many other parts of the world.
Yeah, many other parts of the world. We're falling down that list of the global hub for Christianity. And so, as that as a whole, that's a just point or history reference point and where we're at currently. And then the last thing that I'll say, and we'll move on to the next question, is when we're thinking about our Bibles, we have to remember who was this written to and what did it mean to them, because it can never mean for us what it did not mean for them. And so we can't think about how does this apply to me and think, oh, this is what this verse means, because meaning and application are two different things in the regard. Like there's an original meaning, and that's the meaning. That's what the text means. But I can apply that to my life in a plurality of ways, which is why the scriptures are so timeless. They apply to so many different people in different backgrounds in eras of history, and they apply, but they don't. The meaning does not change. Like we can't read verses in Revelation or in the Old Testament or any book in the Bible and think, well, what does this mean for Rochester, like New York in 2022? Like that's not relevant. And so all right, next question. This one, I wish Nate was here because it's literally directed towards Nate, but we'll answer for him on his behalf. It says, Nate said last week that Jesus had, all he has to do to defeat the Antichrist is breathe, and then he's defeated. War is over. My question is, and this person actually asked 3 questions here, but they kind of go together. The first one is, why does Jesus wait so long? Why does he let people suffer? And is it because he wants to save as many as possible? Those are the 3 tiered. Why does he wait so long? Why does he let people suffer, which are tied together? And then is the answer to that question, which is also a question, is it because he wants as many?
Was that their question, or was that your response to it?
Nope, those are literally, that's how it's worded.
They included all those possibilities. I think there's a lot of insight there just in those
So why does he wait so long? Is the first question. One, no one really knows.
Yeah.
I don't think you can give an accurate answer because we don't see the way God sees. We don't know the big picture like God knows the big picture. And in my life, every time I've questioned God's timing, I've always come around and been like, you were right. Yeah, I missed that, or I didn't see that. And so I think it's a good question. I don't know if we know the answer to that question, right? I think this is where Proverbs 3:5 comes in, right? Lean not on your understanding, but acknowledge God in all your ways, trust him. So I don't know why.
Are we supposed to trust him with our suffering, though?
Yeah.
Well,
so one thing I think the shorter answer is lean towards judgment, right? It's like the more instant answer is like, hey, Adam and Eve screw it up in the garden. I mean, there could have been instant judgment there. Noah and the flood. Hey, let's just wipe it out. I'm tired. Abraham's pleading with God to hang in there with the people of God, Israel. Because the instant answers incline more towards judgment. The longer term answer is, it seems like we have cancer, right? This sin, and there is a process by which God works that out of us, and it involves suffering often, and that suffering blesses us. It changes us. It makes us, it humbles us. It makes us dependent on Him. It makes us mourn for our sin, but it also blesses others in the testimony it produces, and it's taking Him time to redeem the world. So I love that last answer in terms of waiting for enough people to be saved, right? I mean, God's work isn't done yet.
Yeah, I think with God, there's usually never a singular answer, right? In the sphere of God, He is doing a lot of things.
Right.
I think there is this window into his mercy, right? Even Nate said, hey, the window is closing, as we get towards God finishing evil. And God has a heart of grace and mercy, of waiting for people to turn back to him. So why does it take him so long? Well, God wants to see, the Bible makes clear, all turn back to him. Now, we know not all will, but I think there's a lot of different details to why God does why he does.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't, you're right. We can't know.
And there's this piece of nuancing with this person's question about evil continuing and people suffering is there's evil continuing and God purging the world from evil through his judgment. Yeah. And we've talked a lot. There's been a lot of questions sent in about, will Christians, will believers be on the earth when this happened? And what does that look like if they are? What if they're not? And rapture views and all those kind of things. But then there's also suffering that is a byproduct because sin is in our world. Yeah. Sure. That is sometimes that we as human beings inflict it on ourselves in our own lives. And that's suffering because of sin, or there's suffering because of sickness, and which is tied back to sin. And there's suffering because another person in my life, which is tied back to sin. And like there, and the question is
broken natural world,
it's
natural disasters.
Natural disasters. So many things that are going that. It's like, well, why does God allow that to happen? And I'll answer the question like R.C. Sproul once said. He's like, the better question is why does God allow anything good to happen? We are broken, sinful. You said you're looking forward to heaven about being purged from our sinfulness. Like we're all sinful people. Sure. And the better question is why does God allow anything good to happen to broken, messed up, sinful people? Because one of the worst things that ever happened to Christianity is the prosperity gospel of saying God just wants you to be healthy, wealthy, and happy, and that's what he wants for your life. And that's a far stretch from biblical Christianity as the Bible paints it. Now, does God want our suffering and our pain and our agony? No, but
he uses it.
He uses that to make us look more like him and care for the things he cares about, hates the thing he hates. And so yeah, that was a great and very thoughtful question.
Liked it.
Yeah. Next question. In 1 Corinthians 15, verses 51 through 58, it talks about the rapture at the last trumpet. Is it possible that this is the last of the 7 trumpets mentioned in the book of Revelation? If so, then Christians may possibly be around during that part of the tribulation. So this person, the first thing that we need to point out is I'll read 1 Corinthians, those few verses that they reference in that regard. But they assume that this trumpet is talking about the rapture, which you pointed out, Drew, I think in one of your earlier weeks in the series, that a lot of theologians look at trumpets, that language of trumpets, because the word rapture is not mentioned in the book of Revelation, but they look at trumpets, they tie it back to what Paul's literature in 1 Corinthians, 1 and 2 Thessalonians, and they do that. So let's read these one verse. You can go and read on your own 51 through 58 if you would like, but I'll read 51 and 52 because that's the relevant verses. Paul says, listen, I'm telling you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. And then he goes on to talk about death have no victory, where's your sting, yada, yada, yada. So this person says that is talking about the rapture. Well, the first question is, is this actually talking about the rapture?
If people are watching on YouTube, I have to explain my smile, which is simply, I just remember the sign up in the church nursery that said, we shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. Yeah.
One of my professors in Bible college used to say that's the best verse that should be in every nursery. We will not all sleep, but we all must be changed. Yeah. So is this talking about the rapture? That's my first question.
Is 1 Corinthians talking about the rapture?
Is this verse talking about at the last trumpet, dead in Christ will be raised, imperishable, we will all be changed? Is this talking about the rapture?
I mean, yeah, it could be, for sure. I mean,
I would say that I think just because I don't think that deeply about things, I think I probably always assumed it, but now that it's being asked, it seems to me like it could be, a more ultimate judgment of the dead, time too, right? I mean,
yeah,
it could be more at the.
I mean, that's exactly how we would describe the rapture, right?
It is.
If you want to reference back to last week's podcast, we talked in depth about the word rapture and the historic views of what that word what people are implying. And there's it's loaded terms, right? Because different people mean different things when they say the word rapture.
I also think it's important, before Paul does anything, he says this word, mystery. Okay, so I think that's important because a mystery is not solved. It's not discovered. It's still out there. People are trying to figure it out. And, I think this could easily be referring to the rapture. It's the description of how, hey, if someone were to ask me what's the rapture, I think this would be one of the verses I would use, 1 Thessalonians 4, right? Another picture of trumpets. So, it could easily be painting the rapture. The trumpet thing, I don't think is a connection to the 7 trumpets. I think it's more a connection to the 1 Thessalonians 4, where he says the trumpet will blow. I'm not sure it's referring. I guess it could be. I don't think it's connected to the 7 trumpets, but I could be convinced it was.
There must be tons of other uses of trumpet throughout scriptures. I'm trying to
think
think of other angelic announcements or
And I think another thing, Drew, that you pointed out is the word mystery as well. But Paul is obviously using some allegory. He's using some kind of rhetoric in literature, because he doesn't say that we will not all die. He uses the term sleep, which is obviously a euphemism for death. In that regard, he's using that to talk about death, like dying physically.
Oh, in his writings, he often refers to death as the sleep of death.
The sleep. So that's there. And then we'll all be changed in a flash, twinkling of an eye, at a trumpet. And so is there literally going to be a flash? Is there literally going to be a twinkling of an eye? Is there literally going to be a trumpet? And so there's some questions that are all there that we've taken pieces of this verse and made it super literal, but then taken other pieces and said, oh, he's just. And we've picked and chose like which ones we want to be literal, because usually most scholars say, well, every time trumpet's referenced, that's talking about rapture. Yeah. When a trumpet gets blown, that's rapture. And what Paul does not describe, at least in this passage specifically, is not the historic rapture view of, okay, the church gets plucked out of the world before anything bad happens, which this person points out too, because they say, well, obviously at the last trumpet would be the 7th trumpet in the book of Revelation, and there's some wrath that's been poured out. So that would be...
Well, it could be also referring to, I think it's early in Revelation, where John has the vision. It's like, come, and there's a trumpet there as well. So
it's not the last one.
Yeah, it's true. Well, it might be the last one there, but not
what does last mean, right?
Yeah, I think it's a hard. I actually think we view trumpet as someone blowing a trumpet. I think these are all in my interpretation, which isn't always accurate, but like the twinkling of an eye, the trumpet. These are all to me more time frames.
It's like quick.
Yeah, they're all referring to. Whenever this takes place, it's going to be fast. Like the twinkling of an eye, the blowing of a trumpet. Those are all time frames that are very similar. You blow a trumpet, it's done. It's quick. You blink your eye, it's boom.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Trumpets surprise people.
Yeah, and what we know,
exactly. Like,
what we know about all those passages, Revelation, 1 Corinthians, 1, 2 Thessalonians, it's talking about the second coming of Christ.
Yeah, the speed.
And it's going to be, nobody knows when it's going to happen. Jesus talks about that in Matthew, like, nobody knows what's going to happen, and it's going to come like a thief in the night. It's going to be like so quick. It's going to be like, boom, there it is. And
so I wouldn't sit around like listening for trumpets,
Yeah, so that's good. Well, that hopefully that was helpful of just using some open-handedness with some of these things in Revelation. We can know what it's talking about of that Christ is coming again, but the hows about it, it's exactly what Paul says, and how the book of Revelation presents it. It's mystery. Yeah. So it's good. All right. Well, that was all the questions, but I had 2 more. I added 2. All right. You ready for this? They're opinion based.
Did you ever get asked if you had any questions you could ask, Brad?
Oh, Brad, sorry.
I didn't either.
That's what happens when you're the host, right? So they're opinion based. There's no right or wrong answer. I want to know you guys' opinion. So first question I have is, what surprised you the most when studying or talking about or hearing sermons about Revelation? Because obviously, Brad, you weren't in. You didn't write in any of the
No.
sermons or deliver any of them,
No.
but you got to talk about them. So what surprised you the most? We'll start with you about the book of Revelation. When
Nate
hearing
Miller putting a boot in the face of Satan and taking him out with a leg sweep. That was the biggest surprise to me. And probably that the blood was not Jesus' blood. That was an interesting insight. It was just like, whenever I hear blood, I always assume it belongs to the Lamb, to Jesus, but just really the blood of those.
Which there is
that
some
was being
scholarly
judged.
debate about.
Okay.
Nate,
Is there
Nate
some-
gave you
he
definitely his
gave one.
perspective.
Yeah. But Nate, he's calling Satan out. Woo.
Boot in the face. All right, Drew. What surprised you the most? We studied it. We wrote. You delivered.
This might sound
Talked
terrible,
about-
but how much I enjoyed it. I would say I enjoyed the delivery more than I did the research. I think Daniel, you might agree with that, even though you're a little more of I like to read lots of books. How much I grew too. Revelation is a book where if you study it, it doesn't matter how smart you are, you're going to continue to grow. So I would say those two things. I really enjoyed just growing in my knowledge of Revelation, and just how much I've enjoyed walking with our church through this.
Yeah.
And hearing people say, man, I'm not afraid to read the book anymore. I feel like, those are just really cool things that surprised me personally and as a body of Christ.
That's got to be a blast for you, that privilege of just encouraging God's people, right? Just
good.
peeling back the curtain and telling, just getting everyone, think of the best rally and the best stadium for your favorite team or whatever. This is, orders of magnitude, not even, transcendently above all of that, just to be able to encourage the people.
And
of God.
how practical, I think, Revelation was for our
Keep
church.
adding all right?
Yeah,
You said, what is the one thing?
You didn't put a limit on there. You were like, what? Did you say what is the one thing?
No, I said what is the most? What surprised you the most? So it implied one. So
Well,
next time I ask a question, I'll be more specific.
if you're allowed to ask the questions, I'm allowed to interpret the questions. And I had something good, and now I'm losing.
You were about to steal what I was going to say. That's why I interrupted, which was I was surprised by how practical.
You're asking the questions, not answering.
practical.
I'll let you do it. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, how practical it was, of just I've been, even as went to seminary and Bible college and been on church staff for a number of years. I've never taught the Book of Revelation, or really, it's not been one of my I can't wait to read it in my Bible reading plan. Like when it comes up, I'm like, oh, how fast can I get through this?
Yeah.
But as we dug in, it was like, man, this is like very, very practical to us, when a lot of times it doesn't seem like it is. So
Yeah, I would say in one way the bar was low going in, only in the sense that I dreaded
What
it.
are you trying to say, Brad?
What I'm trying to say.
the bar was low, huh?
The bar was low. Hang with me. Hang with me.
These guys are doing Revelation.
It was that opening quote from Drew, right? I mean, did you say parishioner? Every parishioner's dream, every church attender's dream, and every pastor's nightmare.
Yeah.
But that nightmare, I shared in the nightmare a bit, just in terms of really 9 weeks of Revelation. Can't we do a more practical book, right? Mm-hmm. Something that's clearer, something that's not going to get people all arguing. So, in that sense, I went in with a bit of dread.
Sure.
But then to come out with such encouragement, and I think part of it just was. I mean, I've just heard growing up some of these things tackled in a timeline way, right? Trying to connect everything to every headline we see today, and those sort of things. And those are not fruitful endeavors.
Yeah.
But to really see Christ, see the conquering King, see the consummation of history, see the tears wiped away, hear the prayers answered. I mean, that's the stuff you get ramped up about.
See my jump shot at the end.
Yeah. All right, last question, and I'm going to add one thing in there. I'm going to read back to them. So, in light of the past 9 weeks, what's one piece of the Book of Revelation that you're like, I want to dive into this more? I want to read on this or research it, think about it more. What's one thing, one section?
I would say the segments of 7, and just trying to understand better the views. You got the simultaneous, the telescopic, and there's 3 views. I forget all the
Russian
names.
methodology.
The Russian. I didn't never understand that Russian.
Simultaneous.
But just getting a better, clearer picture of those, I would say that's where I would spend more time.
Yeah. I would say one I'll answer, and then Brad, you can close this out, okay?
Oh,
I
boy.
think mine is tied to the series of 7 as well, but more on is it progressive? Does it seem like there seems like there's some nuance there that have large implications based on how you land on interpret. Like if you are simultaneous, it really impacts how you view the book of Revelation as a whole versus, the consecutive view where it's just one after another, and that's kind of the timeline approach of trying to make the book of Revelation fit on a timeline, but then the telescopic could sit you in different, so mine's similar, but what are the implications of each of these views as it plays to the book as a whole? Because I think that's part of the question is around that study is when you try to make it fit on a timeline, you have to make it all fit on a timeline. You can't pick and choose. So that's similar.
Yeah, I want to hear the wording of your question again. What am I?
You forgot the question already.
No, what am I
forgot
most
the
looking
question.
forward to? What
do you want to dive
do?
into? Study more. Think about more. In what
I don't actually want to study more. I want to read. No, I want to read more is what I want to do. In the sense that I just feel like the table was set so beautifully to really meditate, on it and to go through it slowly.
Yeah.
That's
and
good.
just to, again, I'm inclined to feel more like I do about the Psalms. With Psalms, I just love. The throne of God, I mean, even Psalm 104 I was reading this morning and just, his righteousness being spread and stuff. But I want to see the throne, and so for me, that means going back through and reading it slowly, digesting it, with less of an agenda but just soaking in it and letting God.
I think that's a
impress me.
great challenge as we wind down the series. I might even add this to my message is just, okay, we just walked 9 weeks. Go read the book now. Go read the book and say, okay, where am I lacking understanding? And then dive a little bit deeper.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for tuning in this week to the book of Revelation questions. That's the last it. We wrapped it up. So we hope this episode and others like it have helped you grow in your relationship with Jesus. We'll see you next week on A Little Better.